All right. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all here. Big crowd. So this is all about some of our experiences mentoring. So it's not just about the Summer of Code, but it's about what kind of things you can do in sort of a formalized mentoring program to get people to stick around. Does anybody not familiar with the Summer of Code? Okay, yeah, of course, Carol, all right. Yeah, so sitting back there is the person who's running the Summer of Code, so if you have any questions, ask her instead of me. I can pass the mic around later on. Okay, yeah, ask me, and then I'll say, I'll defer that to Carol. So, let's see. I was going to make a graph for this, but I ran out of time to work on it, so I just put up a bunch of numbers. Basically, we've been doing the Summer of Code for 6 years now, every year except for the first one. And I took over 3 years ago in 2009 as the administrator for Gentoo, because every single organization has its own administration. So it's a lot like the dev rooms here, where they're all run individually, and they all kind of have their own rules. So just looking at the numbers, you can see that almost everybody passes, and on the right, what I'm showing you is of the people who pass, how many of them actually become developers later on. This has been a big problem for us in the past, and this is actually the reason that I decided to take over myself doing this, because I had more time to commit than the person who had been. And you can see in 2009 when I took over, we started going from about 20 to 40% up to about 60 to 70% as far as people who stick around. And it's been sort of learning as we go. So I didn't come into this knowing exactly how to do it. I sort of learned by failing, failing fast and often, and then sorting things out to see what worked. So we've got about 15 to 20 people, students every year, and we go through about 75 or so proposals to pick those students. So the first thing, it only really applies to big projects. How many of you are in a big open source project right now? Okay, good. So we've got the right audience here. So I've added sort of a lot of formality to the selecting application side of things. I actually keep track of everything in a spreadsheet now, and I do all kinds of fancy graphing to try and determine what our cutoff should be in terms of rankings. And I can say, the best thing that's worked for us is having some level of consistency from the start instead of just letting individual mentors sort of do ad hoc ranking, deciding their own scale of what's good and what's bad, because then you end up with a totally meaningless result in the end. So on the front end, if you're getting a bunch of people applying, you kind of have to add some more management, which means more work for the admin. So you have to be willing to accept that. Like I said, I've got a spreadsheet. I track every score. I track how many rankings each proposal has gotten from various mentors to make sure that it's not just a good average score, but it's a well-represented score. So for example, if we've got 30 or 40 mentors, I want every proposal to get read by 15 of them, at least. There's no way you're going to get everybody to read all of them because some people have better things to do with their time. I don't understand that. And one other thing I want to point on here is it's a continuing process trying to recruit people into your project. It's not something that, well, if you don't get them a month after the Summer of Code ends, then they're gone. And that's why I put some question marks down on the bottom for this year's program, which is actually last year's program, but we're still working on recruiting the people. So if you really want these people to join your project, you have to never give up. And sometimes they don't realize until they're already working on your project how much fun they're going to have and how good it's going to be. So it's kind of like dragging a cat around by its tail to get them to start up, but then they get sucked in and suddenly they love it and having a great time. And in fact, we've got some people who joined through the Summer of Code who are now doing more stuff than I do nowadays in Gentoo, at least. So I'm just going to run through my 3.5-step process for getting recruits, starting with step 0. And this is all about very basic stuff, right? So if you're going to do this program, what are you trying to get out of it? Because the Summer of Code isn't necessarily about recruiting people or about getting code. It's you set your own goals and you try and meet them. And so for us, our number one goal, we don't care about anything else, is get these people to stick around after the summer's over. And that affects the kinds of things you track and the way you decide who to admit, and the way you decide whether to fail or pass people. It affects the whole program, how you mentor people all the way through, and how you decide, well, like after the summer is over, how long and how hard to pursue people to try and get them to join up. So for us, if we say we're trying to recruit every single person we can, that means when we're looking through applications, we're trying to get a different sense than things like technical skills. We're looking for enthusiasm and for passion. And we're looking for some kind of hint of, do they have a plan to stick around after the summer's over? But it's tricky because you don't want to give too much away, because they're students and they will a lot of times give the answer they think they're supposed to give. So it can be, you can ask a question like, are you going to stay after the summer's done? And it's pretty obvious to anybody reading it that it could be a negative thing if you say no. So you have to tease it out and ask more subtle questions like, what are your plans for long-term maintenance of your project? How do you see that working? And if they say, well, I'll be around and other people will help me, but my plans are to help keep working on this, then it's a good sign. And if they say something that might seem just fine, which is, yeah, I think you guys can take good care of it after the summer's over, that's a big red mark in our book. So we mark people down for that kind of stuff. And a point that I always like to make in different talks is that the technical skills and things like passion and enthusiasm are two orthogonal axes. So one doesn't counterbalance the other. So we are looking for people who have the technical skills, but we're looking for people who also have the enthusiasm. And we won't allow people who only have the technical skills, but seem like they're a full-time student during the year and they're here to work on code for the summer and then go back to being a full-time student. We're looking for people who are gonna, put up the commitment all year round. And as far as measuring progress goes, I've got a big spreadsheet, and every week I'm checking in with mentors, checking in with students to see how things are going. And I have, it's very simplistic. It's just little red checks or black checks, and the red check says, go nag this person for a while. So you can't decide how you're going to win unless you actually know what you're trying to do. This is the first thing we do, and in the back is a couple of tablets that are supposed to signify the 10 Commandments. So it's all about setting the rules and setting the expectations up front so that people understand, at least build an understanding of what it's like to be a student with your organization. So all we do is at the top of people who are applying at the top of their application and on our info pages we say, most people who join this program become developers. And just by simply saying that, we've vastly increased the number of people who become developers by building this mental model for them of they think this is how the program works. You work on it for the summer and you don't leave. You stay. You keep working on Gen 2. Oh, by the way, feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts or any questions or anything, because I've only got about 5 slides. So as soon as we get through number 3, I'm just going to repeat them again, and then I'll be done. So the first thing is about establishing expectations, and it's very easy. All you have to do is just say so right at the start. And I'm not sure if that's changing the people who apply or just the same people are applying with a different opinion, what kind of self-selection it is. But either way, it certainly seems to be working. And the second point is to make sure they're actually part of the community, because it's the social connections that keep people around and not the code they work on when you're talking about a large community project. So, before people apply, we have requirements that say you have to post to our mailing list about your project. You have to talk on IRC, in our IRC channel. You have to get to know the people to start building those relationships even before they are accepted. And this is another thing where if you know the goals, you can build criteria from the start. So if people aren't doing a good job of interacting on IRC or on the lists, we don't let them into the program. So no matter how good their proposal is, if they can't communicate with us, they're not going to be in from the start. And this is one of the things we learned through failing, because a few years back we had to fail about 4, maybe 5 of our people out of 14 or 15. And in almost every case, it was because of communication problems that had we tried as soon as people were applying to get them talking on Listen on IRC, we would have known first off that they weren't suitable for our program. Yeah, it's a good question, and there's no perfect measurement, right?
Tony, if you can repeat the question
so
the people...
Right, because the mic. So the question was, how do you make people interact on IRC, and how do you measure it? And for me, it's very qualitative. I'm just looking for somebody, if I've seen them on our IRC channel for GSOC, they get a +1. And because we have a GSOC-specific IRC channel, Gen2-SOC, I think. So if they're on there and if they're talking, I read every single line that's said in that channel. I'm not missing anybody. And I actually go back to my spreadsheet, and if I see people talking, I mark it off. Because once you get a certain number of people, it's very hard to remember who's been talking and who hasn't, because you're talking about the 75 people applying and not the 15 who end up getting in. Yeah, Dave.
Have you ever heard of super serious stats? Super serious stats.
Is that one of the IRC statistics?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
So you can, it cuts it down by day, by week, by month, you see people there.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen some statistics packages for IRC, but I haven't really used them for this. And the reason is, well, you can talk a lot without saying anything. So if I'm just looking at the lines of text that are out there, it's not necessarily the most useful measure as the ability to communicate well, which you get from reading what they said and seeing how they're interacting with their potential mentors and with the other applicants. So yeah, it's not just lines of text, just like it's not just lines of code that make a good package. And one of the problems that we've encountered, both in Gen2 and I'm also admin for x.org, is students only interacting with their mentors and not with the rest of the community. And that's, I think, half of the people we failed, that's been the reason. Almost every failure in the x.org side, that is the reason. There was one who somehow slipped in without really knowing how to write code. That was entirely my fault, because I'm looking so much at the social side of things that sometimes I forget to look at the technical side of things. The funny thing is, though, he's still super enthusiastic about x.org. We had to fail him, but he understood exactly what was going on. And now he's getting better at coding, and he's actually continuing to contribute to the community. So if you're recruiting people for passion, you know, they stay passionate. It doesn't disappear. And the third point is simply being persistent. And sometimes as students, people don't understand that they're welcome to join the project as developers, because everybody they're talking to seems so much more expert than them. It's like if any of you were in Lydia's talk half an hour ago on the Open Advice book, you don't always remember what you used to know when you started out. So these students are around for a few months, and everybody else looks like a super expert to them. So they don't realize that they could be a super expert too in a few months, and they're welcome to join and start the road toward that process. So it goes back to the first point about setting the expectations, where if you tell people, you know, we would love you to join the project, you're welcome here. It's not just we're okay with you joining if you really want to and try hard. It's, you know, please join us because we wish you're here. We wish you'd stick around. We loved having you for the summer, and we want you to be here for the next 10 years too. So, like I said, I'm just going to remind you of the last 3 things I said. So it's about deciding how you want to win, and then winning. That's all I have for slides, so if there's any discussion you'd like to have, please do.
Thanks for the talk, Donnie. How are you defining, basically on your first slide, who a developer is?
For us, a developer is a nebulous term in Gen 2, but the kind of people who are working on Summer of Code are always writing code. So that, for the purposes of this talk, that's what a developer is. And whether it's working on the same project they work on during the summer, or switching tracks and becoming a package maintainer, for example, all of that counts as being a developer after the summer's over.
So do you have some, I don't know, some rules around, you know, the person has to have committed within the last month, or they have to, I have to have seen them in the IRC channel, or some combination of the above? So for example, like if you had a student who worked on a GSOC project and then disappeared, but then came back the following summer, would you consider that person a developer in the community?
No, because if you've got code, what happens to it when they're gone? You know, it just sits there and rots the other 9 months of the year. I mean, that's not somebody who's part of the community. That's somebody who's there for the money and maybe the prestige. We did have one student who did that, and he seemed more enthusiastic the second summer around, so we let him back in, and then he disappeared again. So, you know, you have to look at actions and not intents.
And then the other question I had was, do you guys have any notes on your application for students? Firstly, with regard to that they have to have made a commit before they submit their proposal or anything like that? And then also, do you have any, do you basically have any guidelines about basically we expect that you will stay involved in the community and that's part of the proposal acceptance process?
So our proposal, we have 3 requirements on there. And the first one is that they have to prove they can actually use the tools and the infrastructure to do something useful, because we don't want them to be screwing around for 3 weeks getting Git set up and learning how to make commits and push code. So they have to use the tools. They have to, for example, create a patch in the code base they're going to be working on, commit it with Git, and post the repo somewhere. Or they have to you know, fix a bug in Bugzilla, and we'll point them to specific bugs that are related to their project to fix, not just some kind of arbitrary hoop they have to jump through, but something that's relevant. So the first one is use the tools. The second one is interact with the community. And the third one is tell us how to get in touch with you. Because sometimes people just disappear and you don't know what happened to them. But if you have their address and their phone number, you can go bang on their door. And we've done that.
Hi.
David.
Is it my turn?
You've got the mic.
I put up my hand. 2 things. First, you do a lot of work on this. How much time do you spend mentoring in the Mento project, in the Mento Gen 2 project? And second, is it something you think you're going to keep up for a long time? And what are you doing about recruiting a replacement for yourself when you're not going to do it anymore?
Oh, that's a great question. So first off, let's see. GSOC is a very seasonal activity. And the most intensive part for the administrator is up front. Once the summer has started, I basically am there to solve problems and not much else. Yeah. Well, yeah, as the summer is ending and then after it's over. So for me, I spend about a month, probably 20 hours every week during that month. Oh, great. We're actually filling up the time. Yeah, so probably about almost a half-time job for a month during the proposal process between when we're announced as being in the program and when we have to submit our final rankings. And after that, it goes way, way down, and it's more like maybe 5 hours a week, if that. Because all I'm doing is I look at the mailing list and see if the students sent their status report for the week. And because we do require weekly status reports, that's my main method for making sure things are going on track. And the students don't like it, but you know, frankly, my time is more valuable than theirs because I don't have as much of it. Yeah, and so as far as the bus factor goes, I've been trying to recruit more administrators to work with me on this. In fact, last year, around the end of the program, we brought on Leslie Hawthorne, who used to run GSOC from Google, to help with Gentoo's GSOC program. And she'll be, I think, helping more next year, whenever the time rolls around. And then we've got a couple of other co-admins too who basically, when I'm busy for some reason, they can pick it up. The former administrator is probably the best bus defense at this point in time. And that's exactly why I'm trying to get out there and do stuff like this, so that everything I'm doing is somehow documented. So, you know, even if I do get hit by a bus, people know exactly what to do, even if they don't have the experience doing it.
Any more questions? No? That's good.
Right.
So that was Donny Berghold. Thank you very much for coming. Big round of applause for him, please.
And now we should be back on schedule. Huh?
Yes, thank you.